Every year on 1st February, the country's budget is announced by the country's finance minister, in which we get to know how much money does the government earn and how much money is spent in different places for the welfare of people. As usual, this year too, on 1st February, the finance minister Nirmala Sitaraman presented the union budget of 2024. But the difference was that this year's budget was an interim budget.
I commend the interim budget to this August House. Jai Hind.
It is a temporary budget that will give estimate only for this year. This is because this year the Lok Sabha election will take place. After the elections, once the new government is formed, the full budget will be presented in July. This is done every time in an election year. But this doesn't mean that the interim budget is not crucial. This tells us how the government will spend money during the next few months. And we will also get to know the overall strategy and direction of the government. So let's understand in this video what's in this new budget for you, the common people, and the promises made in the previous budget, as well as the expenses, and how much of it was achieved and what were the results. Similar to last year, the main focus area of the government in this budget was on capital expenditure. In short, it is also called CapEx. It refers to the money that the government spends on long-term assets. Large infrastructure projects in the economy, like making roads, railway ports, large-scale buildings or bridges. Last year, the government had already increased this expenditure a lot, by 33% and allocated 10 lakh crore rupees. The data shows that the government had not spent the entire 10 lakh crore rupees last year. The actual spending was 9.5 lakh crores. But this year, it has been increased further by 11.11%. The government plans to spend 11.11 lakh crore rupees this year. The reason behind this is very simple. The government says if money is spent on these avenues, it boosts economic growth and leads to employment creation. People get jobs when such bridges, roads and ports are built. The finance minister said that in the last 4 years, the capital expenditure has increased by 3 times. For railway, especially 2.5 lakh crores has been allocated and 3 new corridors have been announced. Energy, mineral and cement corridor, port corridor and high traffic density corridor. The finance minister also said that more than 40,000 rail coaches will be converted to Vande Bharat standards.
40,000 normal rail bogies will be converted to Vande Bharat standards.
This year's railway allocation is much higher than last year's 2.41 lakh crore. While last year, we had already seen an increase of 1 lakh crore. This is good news, but hopefully its impact will be seen on the ground, railway safety as well. Because last year, there were many accidents. On 29th October, the railway collision in Andhra Pradesh. On 11th October, Bihar Northeast Express derailment. On 26th September, Mathura train derailment. In June 2023, we witnessed train collision in Odisha, which was one of the most dangerous accidents in the history of nation. Almost 300 people lost their lives in this accident.
In India, where at least 260 people have been killed in a train crash in the eastern state of Odisha. It's already the country's worst train crash this century.
In agriculture sector, the government has announced Atmanirbhar Oilseeds Abhiyan and focused on fertilizers like Nano DAP. Nano DAP stands for Nano Diammonium Phosphate, a type of eco-friendly fertilizer with 8% nitrogen and 16% phosphorus. This is very useful in green farming. That is why it is being promoted. On the other hand, in the Oilseeds initiative, the government has said that they want to cut the imports from outside the country. They want to cut down edible oil imports from 60% to 30% so that India can become self-reliant in seeds like mustard, groundnut, soybean and sunflower. But subsidies that are given for fertilizers saw a budget cut. In comparison to 1.89 lakh crore rupees from last year, only 1.64 lakh crore has been allocated this year. Food subsidies has also been cut. Last year's budget allocation was 2.12 lakh crores. This year, it has been reduced to 2.02 lakh crore. Coming to education and health sector, we got some bad news. The government had already cut the education budget last year, but the amount that the government had promised to spend last year, they didn't even spend that. In the last year's budget, the government promised to spend 1.16 lakh crore on education. But according to the revised budget estimates, the government will be able to spend only 1.08 lakh crore. This year, there is a small increase in the education budget. Instead of 1.16 lakh crore, the government now has allocated 1.25 lakh crore. On top of that, in education sector, big budget cuts have been made in many places. The budget allocated for IIT and IIM has also been decreased this year. Instead of 10,384 crores, 10,324 crores for IIT. Instead of 300 crores for IIM last year, only 212 crores have been allocated this year. But whereas this budget increased in education, more money is being spent on central universities. Instead of 115 billion last year, 150 billion have been allocated this year. The amount spent on research and innovation has been increased. Instead of 210 crores last year, 355 crores has been allocated this year. In healthcare sector last year, the government had allocated 89,000 crores, but according to revised estimates, only 79,000 crores was spent. This year, a small increase will be seen. Instead of 89,000 crores, government has allocated 90,000 crores. Here, two initiatives has been announced by the government. First, Ayushman Bharat scheme will be expanded, and second, they are focused on cervical cancer vaccine too. After this, coming to housing, where Prime Minister Awas scheme is underway to give affordable housing to the poor. Its allocation has been increased. Instead of 79,590 crores last year, 80,671 crores has been allocated this year. Under this scheme, the government has also said that they will launch a new scheme for the deserving section of the middle class. Those who live in rented house, slums or unauthorized colonies will be given the opportunity to build or buy their own houses. If we talk about overall economy, India's real GDP growth rate, which is projected for 23-24, will be 7.3%. Next, we come to second biggest focus area of this budget, that is reducing fiscal deficit. Fiscal deficit is the difference between government's revenue and expenditure. The amount spent by the government and the revenue it earns. The difference between the two is fiscal deficit. Since the word deficit is being used here, it means that compared to the revenue of the government, they are spending more than that. For this year, India's fiscal deficit is estimated to be 17.86 trillion rupees. But we usually look at this fiscal deficit as a percentage of GDP. Last year, the government had set a target that it should be 5.9% of GDP this year. Revised estimates show that not only the government has achieved its target, but they have brought it down by 5.8%. This is lower than before, which is a good thing. If we talk about taxes, there is nothing for the common people in this budget because nothing has changed in comparison to last year. Income tax slabs are still there, but another interesting thing to see here is that which taxes will generate most revenue for the government. Budget document shows that in FY 2025, government will earn 19% of its revenue from taxes collected under income tax. On the second number is GST with 18%. The government will earn 18% of its revenue from taxes collected under GST, and then comes the corporate tax at 17%. This shows that the biggest contribution for the government's revenue is from the income tax payers, and GST payers and contribution of the corporate tax by these companies are lower than this. However, the bigger source of income for the government is still borrowing. Borrowing is at 28%. The finance minister has put a tagline for this budget: Viksit Bharat by 2047, that is, developed India by 2047. And she also promised that India will become a developed nation by 2047. And also by 2030, India will become a $7 trillion economy.
As per a latest report by the Finance Ministry, the Indian economy can, of course, hit that, and it can aspire to hit that $7 trillion mark by 2030.
Anyways, this was the story of this year's interim budget. We will get to know the rest of the details when the full budget is presented in July. Thank you for watching this video. If you like this video, kindly subscribe to our channel.